the research is so extensive that it seems crazy to refute it or disregard it. So we've put together a portfolio called the Parity portfolio, P-A-R-I-T-Y portfolio, that is based on this research, and we invest only in companies that meet our financial criteria and that have a minimum of 3 women on their board. Last summer, on my vacation, I was doing research on companies, and I came across research by Catalyst at the time that shows that there is a positive correlation between significant female representation in the boardroom and a company's bottom line. And so when I read this research, I thought, wow, this is really important. We have 2 goals. One is to make money for our investors, and 2 is to have a social impact on this important issue of parity in corporate America. We're really striving to get to 50% of female representation on boards in corporate America. And right now, even though the statistics and research shows that there is this positive correlation between female representation on boards and a company's bottom line, right now in the S&P 500, only 16.9% of board members are women. So we want that number to be 50%. There are some studies that show that women are more risk-averse investors. So therefore, maybe women are bringing something to the conversation in a boardroom about questioning some risky behavior, but it's not. Right now, most of the information is anecdotal. I mean, I heard recently from a woman who's a general counsel of a publicly traded company, and she said that the men on the board, they were all men, and she said they were looking for a new board member, and they each started to ask each other, well, who do you know in your Rolodex? And she said, you know, we need a woman on this board. And they were shocked, and they did eventually bring on a woman to the board, and she said, that board member is actually the most well-prepared and the most effective board member. And she has raised the level of their capability on the board. So the men on the board are actually better board members now. So right now it really is anecdotal, although there's starting to be some research as to what happens with the dynamics. And so one of the things is, if one woman is on the board, that's seen as a token. 2 women on the board, there's a little more of a conversation. But 3 women on a board really presents more questioning and more of a conversation and discussion. So something happens with the dynamics. And really the critical mass, the critical number is that 3 women on the board present a real change. When I talk to some women, they don't necessarily feel ready for boards, and they are so ready, it's really ridiculous. So they think they have to do so much more preparation to get on boards, whereas the men have been asked by somebody they knew to come on. That's often the case. So the first screen that we apply to all the companies that we could invest in is how many have 3 women or more on their boards. So that cuts down our universe to about 200 companies. So after that screen, then we have 200 companies to do our due diligence and look at their financials and do a fundamental analysis of what's happening on that with that company. So after looking at the finances and their balance sheets and whether they're dividend payers, and I mean many factors go into how we select the companies based on their finances and also their business model. We then have a third screen, which is about governance and policy, and we understand that this is corporate America. We're not going to agree with everything that all the companies do that we invest in, but if they do something that we find abhorrent, then we don't invest. And we are activist investors, so sometimes our activism is revolved around gender diversity, but sometimes it revolves around other aspects as well. So recently we drafted a letter for our investors to write to a company when we were aware of what that company was doing with regard to trying to cut off the possibility of minimum wage and sick days for its employees. So given that the portfolio, that particular company was in our portfolio, we decided to divest of half of the position at that point. Now, One of the reasons we decided on that day to divest from half the position was because the company was trading, its stock price was at the highest it had ever been at that point. So again, we do want to make money for our investors, but we did also want our investors to still be investors and shareholders when they were writing the letters. We would have 3 months to do our activism around that issue and make the ultimate decision to divest, because obviously we wouldn't be holding the company anymore after those 3 months. Certainly in the sustainability field, some large investors are taking an activist role to get companies to move towards sustainability and focus on those issues. And so yeah, I do believe there's a groundswell in different areas. Some people say, okay, we now have 20 women in the U.S. Senate, and isn't that wonderful? And on the one hand, yes, it's the most it ever has been. But 20%, I mean, we're 50% of the population, and 50% of graduates of college are women, and 60% of master's degrees are awarded to women in this country. So to pass over women just is so not fair. And then we learn, well, actually, it's not good business either. So we have to scratch our heads and say, it's really time.